Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a really fascinating spiritual framework today. We've all hit those periods of just profound darkness or delay, right? Where you kind of feel completely abandoned. Well, the source text we're analyzing today flips that completely. It frames these excruciating periods not as random suffering, but as heavily curated, necessary seasons of divine preparation. We're going to look at how this material takes the concept of the pit, total isolation and loss, and recontextualizes it as the literal birthplace of a promise. It's a massive perspective shift, so let's just get right into it. Our source material hooks us right out of the gate by tapping into something so universally human. It speaks directly to those carrying what it calls silent burdens and unsaid worries. The kind of anxieties that just silently consume your heart day in and day out. And the text immediately challenges our baseline assumptions. It asks, are these just ordinary everyday struggles? Or is there actually something deeply intentional happening behind the scenes here? The premise is that in the exact areas where you feel the most burdened, where you're just sighing silently, totally at a loss for words, that is actually where a divine presence is listening the most intently. And that leads us to a really fascinating redefinition of time itself. The text describes the future in such a unique way. It asserts that what we casually just call tomorrow is, in reality, a doorway. It's not just another repetitive 24 hours that you enter with dread. No, it's framed as a designated space, a specific point where the eternal and the finite actually converge. The source material is basically urging us to wake up to the idea that our ordinary days are steeped in a holy significance way beyond what we normally comprehend. You're stepping into a profound aspect of life, not just, crossing off dates on a calendar. But let's be real, holding on to that perspective is tough when reality hits hard, and the source material addresses this tension perfectly. On one hand, you have the human perspective, that visceral, heavy feeling that our prayers have just been totally forgotten, that our dreams have faded and our passions are just faint, dying memories. But then we contrast that with the divine perspective presented in the text. Citing Hebrews chapter 6, verse 10, the source promises that absolutely no effort is forgotten. It states that what seems silent hasn't perished at all. Actually, every little thing you've entrusted in faith is remembered, and more importantly, it's actively being raised up with fresh vitality according to this framework, even if you literally can't see it yet. Okay, moving right along to section 1, Joseph's journey from the pit. To anchor these abstract promises, the text leans heavily on a powerful archetypal story, the story of Joseph. Let's trace the pacing of this narrative, because it's absolutely crucial to understanding the source material. Point 1, day 1. Joseph is betrayed by his own brothers and sold as if he were nothing. Total, absolute rejection. Point 2, he's literally thrown into a dark pit. At this stage, every single dream he had appears permanently lost. Done. Then, point 3. And notice this isn't a quick fix. He endures years of darkness, imprisonment, and waiting. But here's the critical pivot in the text's logic. Those years in the dark, they were not a punishment. They were a highly controlled environment of preparation. Which brings us to point 4. Decades later, because of that exact preparation, Joseph reaches a position of immense leadership and influence. The text argues there's no way he could have reached that place on his own without the mechanics of the pit. That apparent total loss was, in fact, a deliberate mechanism for profound change. So the crux of this whole idea is summed up in this famous quote from Genesis 50:20. God meant it for good, but you meant to hurt me. The text uses the scripture to establish a definitive rule of sorts. What outwardly looks like a destructive pit, maybe created by malicious intent or just terrible circumstances, is actually, from the divine perspective, an intricate setup for good. The people who threw you in the pit might have genuinely meant to destroy you, but the overarching design was utilizing that exact pit to forge you. So what is this forging process? That brings us to section 2, the season of preparation. The text references Ecclesiastes 3:1 to broaden the scope here. Every activity under the heavens has a season and a time. By connecting Joseph's time in the dark to this broader universal truth, the source material delivers a really specific message. Those seasons in your life that appear to be completely lost, wasted, or indefinitely delayed, they are actually active, critical times of preparation. Just like Joseph waiting in the dark, you haven't been benched. You haven't been abandoned on the sidelines. The text argues you are actively in a season of being equipped. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why that delay is so necessary. Let's break down this fascinating logic for a second. The text argues that your patience is never in vain, and for a very practical reason. Think about it. If you receive what you're desperately asking for before you're internally ready to handle it, that gift actually becomes a heavy burden. It could literally crush you. However, receiving that exact same thing after the season of preparation ensures that it becomes a source of life and blessing. The darkness, the waiting, the pit, the whole shebang, it's all expanding and softening your heart so it can actually hold the promise without breaking. Furthermore, the text insists that in this framework, you aren't waiting alone. Quoting Isaiah 9:2, it reminds us a huge light has been seen by those who were strolling in the dark. The source claims that God doesn't just wait for you at the finish line. Instead, a path is found straight through your greatest darkness. And what's really unique about the text's assertion here is that this light doesn't just shine down on you from the outside. When this process unfolds, a spark ignites from within you. The darkness itself literally becomes the fuel for your own internal illumination. Which leads us to our final phase, Section 3, the promise of renewal. To really understand the result of all this, we have to look at how the source defines regeneration. According to the text, the goal of this entire agonizing process is not just some external transformation. The objective isn't simply to make your life a little bit easier or to, upgrade your circumstances. No, it is a deep renewal from the very core of your soul. The text puts it incredibly bluntly, stating the divine intent as, I want to make you again. It's a complete structural rebuild from the inside out, which is made possible only because the pit completely dismantled the old you. And because it's a total rebuild, your history no longer dictates your future. As Isaiah 43:19 states, look, I am trying something new. It emerges now. Do you not see it? The source text makes one thing abundantly clear here. Your past setbacks do not limit what is being built right now. You don't have to perfectly comprehend everything or map out the entire way ahead. The message is simply about trusting the step-by-step guidance, knowing that the architect of this new beginning is entirely unhindered by the failures of yesterday. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question to chew on. The text insists that if you walk with faith through this process, everything changes. So the very things you were absolutely certain were just pure darkness, pure loss, and pure pain, will you allow them to transform into a doorway? Will you let the pit become a sacred encounter? It's a profound paradigm shift that challenges us to look at our deepest struggles not as the end of our story, but as the exact necessary preparation for a deeper existence. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this framework gives you a powerful new lens through which to view your own journey.